My experiences in the streets of Nablus and Jenin are really what mobilized me to break my silence. And as a sergeant of a snipers team, one of the things that we did on a nightly, almost on a nightly basis, was a mission called Straw Widows. Widow is basically where you take over a house of a Palestinian family and use it as a military post. And as a sergeant of a snipers team, what we would do is um, make sure that we have a house looking out to the right direction so we can look at the soldiers on the ground or see what's passing by and basically barge in, break into someone's house. Now, these are houses of people that we know in advance are innocent. As a young sergeant, I knew that I'm entering homes of people that probably not going to risk me or my troops. Many times we would go in, arrest or handcuff the head of the family and throw the entire family in the room. And the house was basically ours as we'd like. Now, as we're in the middle of an international crisis with COVID going around, and as Jews around the world are about to sadly probably mostly pray in their homes. I cannot stop thinking about these nightly incursions. When we would have the power, when we would use our power to enter Palestinian living rooms and use their living rooms as our own, it was done so routinely that at some point I myself started feeling numb to the entire experience, and many times even forgetting at moments that there are people that we're using their homes, and we're not just in a military space. I think that one of the most important lessons that I took from that reality in the West Bank was understanding constantly how easy it is to get used to a non-moral or immoral reality. And I think that if there's something that we can all experience and can all feel nowadays, is the importance of our personal sanctuaries, the importance of our homes and our families. I know that as we're now in the middle of our second lockdown, I'm familiarizing myself more and more with my house, which I've been living in for a couple of years now, and suddenly having more time in my house and appreciating my own personal space. I can't even fathom the thought of a stranger coming in and taking over. And I think that if there's something that I think that I have to ask forgiveness for, but I think that we as a society have to ask forgiveness for, is the fact that we have for years now, decades, we've been ignoring the fact that Palestinians are human beings exactly like us. And the fact that when we think about what we are willing to live through and what we're not willing to live through, we very, very quickly shout out when our rights are restricted, and not really understanding or not wanting to hear the fact that for so many years we've been robbing Palestinians of their basic rights. Towards the end of my service, with a lot of question marks sort of rumbling in my head, I grew up in a religious society, and my rabbi in yeshiva told us that a good Jew walks around with question marks, and boy, did I have question marks towards the end of my service. There was this one house in Nablus that we entered, the house of a physician, of a doctor. Had big windows looking into the right direction, and that was basically his only crime. And as we barge into the house and cover his eyes and handcuff him and throw in his wife and his daughter into the room, I personally felt, honestly, sort of sick to my stomach at that moment, and I tried to remedy that by going and speaking with him after we entered the house. And the interesting thing that he did, this Palestinian physician in Nablus, is he managed to flip the entire situation on its head and explain to me, as a young soldier, basically, as a young person, what his life is like as a Palestinian, the fear of his house being taken over, the fear of the soldiers arresting him or his wife or his daughter, his inability to move from area to area, or the fear to be stopped for many hours in a checkpoint, the arbitrariness of the occupation. And for me, in that moment, he managed to put his experience in an entire constellation of experiences. And I think that was probably the most important lesson. And if there's one thing I can leave you with now, sort of at the entrance of Yom Kippur, the day that we have to ask forgiveness, is we have to see how every year from this Yom Kippur till the next Yom Kippur, we do not forget our wrongdoings, and we do not forget the fact that people, millions of them, are suffering because of our political decisions. And that's why it's important for Israelis, but Jews around the world as well, to stand up and take responsibility. And for American Jews, especially under this current administration, it's crucial to understand that you have a part in this reality. I walked around with, for my entire service, with an M16, property of the USA government. The decisions of the American people affect the reality here. And when people around Israel were waiting for the decision of the Trump administration, yes annexation, no annexation, how this entire region will pan out, this was something that was being done thousands of miles away, but affected our reality here. And therefore, in the end of the day, we're all in this together. And it's key for us to understand that the bad political players that are trying to entrench occupation and make this reality that is as close as we can to a de facto permanent military dictatorship is something that we have to bring to an end. And the way for us to bring it to an end is to have the same audacity and chutzpah as our political opponents. So if there's a point that I'll end with, is we need to have solidarity with each other and solidarity with Palestinians, and think actively what our next year will look like, and how do we come to our next Yom Kippur with more hope, with more audacity, and with more solidarity. And I believe that will help us bring an end to the occupation. There's many wrongdoings and violence all over the territories. One specific area that we focus on is the South Hebron Hills, an area, the most southernest tip of the West Bank. There's a specific area within that area called Firing Zone 918. There are dozens of Palestinian communities there, where the Israeli military for years has prevented them from expanding and developing, because the area that they're in was declared a firing zone after these communities have been living there. And just recently, a Supreme Court case has come to the end of its line and was forced after years of litigation to make a decision. And there is an actual fear of these entire communities to be uprooted, these communities to be forced out of their land when the Israeli military is training Palestinian communities of shepherds and farmers. And this is something happening now. So if firing zone 918 could be in our prayers, if the people living there, living under our control, can be in our prayers, and hopefully we can find a way, a practical way to allow these communities, these families to stay on their land and prosper without the constant fear of expulsion. Like always, it's a tragedy, but I think that specifically now under COVID, we see an increase in settler violence because there's really no accountability as usual, but there's hardly anyone visiting from the outside. And with the spike in settler violence, we also see more and more settlement construction. So these two elements which are connected, settler violence and settlement expansion, are happening sort of the hospice of COVID, which I think is one more example, one more reason that we feel the urgency to go back and guide towards there, because the educational aspect is extremely important, but the fact that we are there, that we meet Palestinians, that we can shed a light on the realities there is extremely important. So Hebron, like the rest of the West Bank, I think is a moment where everything we've seen, the de facto annexation, even though the de jure annexation, the legal annexation didn't pass, but the de facto annexation is very much there. And we see not only entrenchment of the reality, but more and more massive, grandiose projects that sadly will only push more and more Palestinians out.